낭독하는 명작 동화 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time, there was a queen. She was beautiful. Every day, she hoped to have a child. One day, she was looking out the window. There was a lot of snow outside. She hoped to have a child as beautiful as the snow. Soon, a baby girl was born. The queen named her Snow White. Snow White was also very beautiful, but the queen died soon after. The king got married again. The new queen was pretty but selfish. She had a magic mirror. Every day, she talked to the mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" she asked. The mirror answered,
"You are, Your Majesty."
Snow White grew up. She became a beautiful young lady. One day, the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" It answered,
"Snow White is the fairest."
The queen was furious, so she called the hunter. "Take Snow White away," she said. "I do not want to see her again." The hunter took Snow White to the forest, but he could not hurt her. "Snow White, run away! The queen wants to kill you," he told her. Snow White ran deeper into the forest. Then she found a small house. "Maybe I can stay here," she thought. She went inside the house. There was no one. She went upstairs and saw 7 small beds. Snow White lay down on them, and she fell asleep. When night came, 7 dwarfs entered the house. They were the owners of the house. "Look at these footsteps. Who is in the house?" one of them asked. Snow White heard the sound and woke up. "Who are you?" one dwarf asked. "I am Snow White," she answered. She told the dwarfs her story. They felt sorry for her.
"You need a place to stay. You can stay here,"
they said. Snow White was happy to be safe. They all became good friends. Back at the castle, the queen asked her mirror again. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?"
"Snow White is still the fairest. She is now with dwarfs,"
it said. "She is still alive?" the queen shouted. She wanted to go and check for herself. The queen dressed as a sailor. She went to the dwarf's house. She knocked on the door. Snow White opened the door. The queen showed colorful ribbons to Snow White. Snow White did not know she was the queen. "Would you like to try one?" the queen asked. "Sure," Snow White answered. The queen tied a ribbon around Snow White's waist. She tied it too tightly. Snow White could not breathe. She fell, and the queen left. The dwarfs came home. They found Snow White on the floor. They untied the ribbon. Snow White could breathe again. The dwarfs were glad. The queen was now in the castle, but she learned that Snow White was still alive. The queen dressed as a sailor again. She went back to the dwarf's house. This time, she showed calms to Snow White. They were poisoned combs. Snow White fell after she used one, but the dwarfs saved Snow White again. "Do not talk to strangers," they said. They wanted to keep her safe. The queen heard that Snow White was still alive. She dressed as a farmer. She went to the dwarf's house again. This time, she brought a poisoned apple. "Do you want this apple?" the queen asked. Snow White thought, "The dwarfs told me to be careful." But Snow White liked apples, so she said, "Sure." She took a bite and fell. The dwarfs came home. They saw Snow White on the ground. "Snow White, wake up!" they shouted. She did not wake up. They tried to help her, but nothing worked. They thought she was dead. But Snow White still looked alive. So the dwarfs made a glass of coffin. They put Snow White in it. They watched over her every day. They cried for many nights. One day, a prince was passing by. He saw Snow White in the coffin. He thought she was sleeping. He fell in love with her at first sight. So the prince's servants carried the coffin. But they stumbled. Suddenly, Snow White started coughing. A piece of apple popped out from her throat. She was alive. Snow White saw the prince. She liked him too. The prince asked her to marry him. Snow White said, "Yes." They were both very happy. Snow White and the prince got married. Snow White was kind. The prince was loving. Everyone was happy for them. They had a big celebration. The queen saw Snow White at the wedding. She was very angry. So she ran away and never came back. The dwarfs were happy too. They danced and celebrated with everyone. So in the end, they all lived happily ever after. The end.